Today we're talking to the lovely Catherine Lacey, who is Director of Service Operations at Acquired Brain Injury Ireland. Catherine, you're very welcome to Disability Matters.
Thanks so much, John.
You might start, if you will, just by telling us a few bits about the causes of acquired brain injury.
Okay. So an acquired brain injury can happen to anybody at any time. Some of the typical causes would be perhaps after a stroke, after perhaps an aneurysm or brain cancer, and then that's in the acquired brain injury category, and then traumatic brain injury. So people after road traffic accidents, falls, assaults. There's any number of reasons why and how people acquire brain injuries.
Now, can you take us through some of the effects on the body when a person has an acquired brain injury?
Sure. So the effects can be both physical and cognitive. So when you're thinking around all the different things that our brains do for us without us even realizing they do. So that's anything from your memory, your attention, your ability to solve problems, your ability to hold information, fatigue, tiredness, being able to, go back to the life that you had maybe before your road traffic accident or before whatever the brain injury might be. Um, can you go back to the role that you were in, if it was a mother, a child? But it can happen to anyone. So getting back to the role, getting back to work perhaps or education, they can be extremely challenging after you've acquired a brain injury without the right supports in place. And every brain injury is so different.
Right.
So it really depends on what extent, I suppose, of the injury, and also what part of the brain has been damaged. Each part of our brain has a different function and controls different actions and reactions
Yeah.
and mood and so on. So it's very complex. Every brain injury is unique, and every individually can be impacted differently.
It's a very emotional thing, a brain injury.
A huge adjustment in someone's life, because to survive such a, I suppose, a trauma is the first part of it, but then to try and figure out and live with the consequences of that, which don't always subside, and
Yeah.
some of those challenges need to be supported and met. And we always say as well, the brain injury doesn't just happen to the person, it happens to the entire family. So the person as they were perhaps before and the person as they are after may not be the same. It may not feel the same. And the family are there trying to support through that trauma and through that adjustment phase as well. So everybody needs to be supported, both the family and the person.
Yeah. Do you have any statistics on acquired brain injury?
So there's an estimate, it is an estimated figure that about 19,000 people in Ireland per year acquire a
Wow.
brain injury. Absolutely. It's astonishing. So that would cover everything from concussion to all the stroke and traumatic brain injuries and that. So that would be hospital admissions and so
Right.
on that would record those. So it's not every brain injury requires maybe a service as a follow-up, but yeah, it's a stark figure. So that's multiple thousands of people in Ireland
Yeah.
already living with a brain injury, and then those that are acquiring them year on year as well.
Very good. It's stark figures, aren't they?
Completely. And I often say as well is that sometimes it's not always, sometimes, for want of a better word, those that are on the maybe milder end of the spectrum,
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that the impact isn't huge. So if you're struggling with fatigue, you're struggling with your mood, and you don't really understand why, they have a knock-on effect to your ability to hold down relationships, hold down your job, hold down your friendships, all the things that can be affected. So the categorization of whether something's mild or severe doesn't always capture the impact of that on that person's life and how they try and navigate afterwards.
So if I'm the person with the injury and I go to your group, what's the
Mhm.
first step in the recovery?
Again, it's very individual. So there's
Okay.
no particular program to say, right, John, you're going on this. We would do an initial assessment, I guess, of need and what we have and where we think we could support you best. So we have a range of services. Um, Again, that would meet different needs, I guess, at different
Yeah,
times.
yeah, I get you.
We have journeys. So we have brain injury case managers, specialists. We have community rehabilitation services where somebody would come in and support you in your home and
Brilliant.
work with you on your goals there. We have our group rehabilitation settings. So you come in and you meet a group of peers and you would be supported and they would hold different social and cognitive groups within those groups. And then we have residential, so where people are supported that need that higher level of support round the clock. But we're always working towards maximizing the person's independence and
Yeah,
abilities and working towards, challenging people, I guess, but within the correct, with the
yeah, I
right
got you. Yeah,
to work on goal setting, and so they're incrementally working toward. They may have the big goal of going back to work or whatever it might be, but you'll be working with the different incremental steps. We also have, as I mentioned, work. We have our Step Ahead Plus program, which
I'll
is a
come
grant
to that.
funded
uh,
program.
If you
Okay,
don't
yeah,
mind, I'll come back to that in a little while.
sure, of
I want
course,
to
yeah.
ask you what advice you would give to somebody who has just had a brain injury and they live alone. They don't have a family.
Yeah, and sometimes through experience, we would often find that sometimes they can be the most vulnerable
Yeah,
in that if you don't have those natural supports in place, it's very difficult. If you're not in the position to self-advocate, often they can be the people to fall through the gaps. So the advice we would give, I suppose, in the first instance, if we get through all those steps and we've
yeah,
met and we've done our assessment and we're moving towards what happens next, would be usually a rehabilitation assistant, which are supported by our clinical teams. We have in different areas, we would have psychologists, perhaps occupational therapists, perhaps social workers. So it's a rehabilitation system underpinned by a clinical team to support. So maybe fatigue is the first thing we might tackle, because if you're
right.
constantly tired and you're not in any kind of routine or you're not meaningfully engaged in activities every day, can very quickly become demotivated, lack of, so we need to maybe figure out sleep and fatigue routine. Like often, like people say, oh, I'm always, I'm tired, I'm always tired. But after brain injury, it's a different level, it's a different type of fatigue.
I
It
got
really
you.
is the oil light coming on, not just, you need, if you need to take a rest break, and it mightn't be a sleep, but it might be a break where you're not on a phone and you're not, you've reduced all stimulation and put the feet up for 15 minutes, and then you're ready to go again. So everybody again will have a different capacity, and that might be your goal, that you would increase your stamina over time as well. But if you don't manage the fatigue bit, all the other tasks
Yeah,
can be
yeah,
harder because you're not um, so like that, maybe memory. So we would look at, maybe you're finding that difficult, you're living on your own. How can you budget? How do you do your shopping? How do you get, can you still use your activities? Can you still do your activities of daily
yeah,
living?
yeah.
Can you look after yourself in the same way that you looked after yourself before? How are you getting out? What are you doing? What's meaningful to you? And how can we make that happen again in some way? So that might include using assistive technology or prompts or on your phone, or so it's not always that you need somebody there reminding you and telling you,
I
but we try
got you.
and set
Yeah,
things up in such a way to maximize that independence again. So we're always trying to make ourselves redundant, to be honest with you. We go in and we try and, we're trying to give people the skills and we pull back. So as someone gains the skills, confidence is obviously massive. So you're really building up people's confidence in themselves again and their abilities. So and you build that through being able to see that you can do things, and you and that feeling of enjoyment, and whilst the memory might be a challenge, these things can help, and so on. So you're building that through experience, a supported experience as well.
brilliant.
So yeah.
That's a fairly comprehensive approach.
It's a very comprehensive approach, and I think there's no doubt, like it has to be a meaningful engagement. It has to
Yeah,
be what's meaningful to you, John, and what's important in your life is that, do you know what I mean? And that could be anything. And as you said, when you're living, that could be your dog, that could be your, do you know what I mean? It can
yeah,
be
yeah,
any different things for different people. But if you can find that connection and develop that relationship, you can get through these tasks of rehabilitation. So it's you can do active rehabilitation without it being right now we're going to go and sit down
yeah,
and do.
yeah, yeah,
Sometimes when people hear rehabilitation, they often think of maybe like functional, so like physiotherapy or do you know what I mean? But
yeah.
this is so much bigger and longer, and this is around people for the rest of people's lives. So you're trying to find that, those connections and supports that will sustain people and that they can keep going.
And tell us then, if I'm a person again with the acquired brain injury, will I be referred automatically from a hospital to your group?
Unfortunately, no. Unfortunately, no. And that is, I suppose, a big part and a big driver for me in my role now is that our systems aren't set up for that. There is no
Okay.
equal access. There is no standardized pathway to rehabilitation. Things are improving. Things are improving in the sense that the HSE are setting up what are called community neuro rehab teams. I'm not sure if you've come across those,
Yeah,
but
no, I know what that means. Yeah,
yeah, so that's only literally Dublin South and the Dublin West. So in certain areas now, those teams have been funded and they're just getting up and running. Now that will just be a 12-week rehab stint. So that would nicely lead into, say, our services. Then after that, if somebody is linked in with the community neuro rehab team, they may continue them with us afterwards, or maybe we work together alongside each other. So it's very good example of integrated care in play, if you like,
yeah,
because you're really supporting that person from hospital to community to home and so on. So I really see a brain injury in the services as a real good exemplar and
yeah, yeah.
pilot for to say here it can work, if we all work together, because from the person's experience point of view, they're agnostic of whether it's the Department of Health or the Department of Disability or wherever the funding or who silos are, the experience is moving through the services and getting the right service at the right time from the right people. So we're very hopeful that things are good. It's going to take a long time, but that idea of a standardized rehabilitation pathway, and that we will be one of the services at the end of that for people to be
Good.
referred into. But absolutely, at the moment, we're not there. We're really not there. And I suppose it's been an education and a privilege that I've had in my role now that I can, because I'm supporting services nationally, so I can see how different it is for a survivor of a brain injury who lives in Donegal versus Cork versus the Midlands versus
Yeah,
Wexford,
yeah,
Galway. So you can really see where we need to do better. Um, and we all need to come together for the solution for that. We need to be working with our colleagues in the HSE and with our colleagues in all the different settings to make that work for the person and for people into the future.
brilliant. And then tell us a little bit about, if you know, of course, about the
Yeah.
history of acquired brain injury Ireland, why it was set up and when.
Mhm. Lovely. Yeah, we're an organisation that were initially set up by a family, Peter Bradley and his family, the O'Connells. They set up the service back in the year 2000. So we're 26 years up and running now this year. And that was in a response to, he had two traumatic brain injuries as a result of a
Oh,
car accident, a motorbike accident, and then he was a passenger in a car. And that meant Peter, who had a very full life and good career ahead of him, ended up in a nursing home looking out the window because there was no other options for Peter at that time. So the family got together and put together effectively a business case for the HSE at the time. And they put up the family home for Peter and then two other gentlemen to move in with him as well who had
brilliant.
brain injuries. And the service blossomed from there, if you like. So the house
Wow.
next door came up for sale and another business case went in. And so the service then grew from that. But very quickly at that time, or within a couple of years of that happening, there was the realization that the community rehabilitation, so supporting people in their own homes, and preventing the need perhaps for a residential service or, was also, so that would have been piloted. And I kind of would describe our organization almost as a grassroots movement. So we have developed, in different counties and in different places in response to need and with, the various relationships with the HSE in those areas and support from the HSE in those areas. So that's we over those 26 years, then we have now, I think we have, is it 17 residential services?
Wow.
Yes, yes. So it's great. So we have, and with that, then we have grown our teams, our support teams, our interdisciplinary teams, our community rehabilitation services, some case management services, and but it's always been in as a response to the need that
Yeah,
exists.
yeah.
That's a real strength, I suppose, and that is what we're here to do, and that's what we continue to do. I think in the early days as well, Barbara O'Connell, who's our CEO for 24 of these 26 years, she
Yeah.
would have had the foresight. We got it's an international accreditation. It's called CARF. So they're called the Commission for Accreditation for Rehabilitation Facilities. So it's an internationally recognized gold standard of rehab. And we've had that in our services, and we get assessed every 3 years against those standards. And we've had that since, I think, 2000 and at least 2006, if not before then. So nearly from the
That-
beginning, we've had that.
That's fantastic to have something
Mm.
like that.
Yes, it is, and it drives that continuous improvement cycle. And we'll be up again. I can't believe it. The end of next year, we'll be through our third, and they'll be over again assessing our services and giving advice
Yeah.
and so on. So I think our services have, we've a lot of our, I think it's reputation. We've grown a good reputation based on we've done what we said we're going to do, and people can see the progress that people make and the impact that it has when they do get the right service at the right time and that they move on. And and I suppose from a model point of view as well, that means those services can transfer to the next person. So this person achieves their goals and they move on, or they need less and less and less support, then that support can go to the next person who comes through.
Yeah, yeah.
So our assessment and referral teams and having our clinicians and having are really vital to the success.
Fantastic. Tell us it now. I know there's a lot of services that you provide, and I won't ask you to go through them all.
Okay.
Go through two of them for me, please.
Okay. Maybe I'll talk a little bit about our case management service.
Yeah, do.
Yeah, that's something that has evolved, I guess, over the years. And it's something we certainly advocate that we need more, a lot more of. I think we've only six in total, in various areas in the country. But I really believe that if we did have brain injury case managers um, assigned per population, if you like, not just one in every county, but let's be strategic and look at our population and health and have it where the need again needs to be met. And if they were in the right place, then we would have that standardized pathway very quickly. So it's not that a case manager is going to be able to provide the full range of services for you, but they act as that single point of contact for the person, for the family to navigate, to signpost, where the services in their locality are or what needs to advocate to the HSE disability services if needed for that person and their needs. Because often the referrals aren't made. So people are leaving hospital without understanding that they
Yeah,
have that brain injury. So if you have that case manager as the standardized, person to refer on to, and we can see the benefits of it. It prevents nursing home placements. It supports people to get out of nursing homes. We have, I think, 50%, sorry, 60% of the people we have in those residential services have come from nursing homes. And
wow.
50% of the people within our residential services
Yeah,
move through and move
good.
to less supported environments. So the case manager is kind of the first step, if you like. And I actually worked as a case manager and I loved that job. And you would really like it's a very challenging role. You're a bit of a catch-all and but the rewards can be mighty because sometimes people only need a very small amount of
Yeah,
input or support, but the impact you've just given them whatever tools or knowledge that they can go off and do what they need to do themselves. And I would say that true for the family as well,
Right.
Um, so the case management service really is in terms of, again, I'm probably in my value for money and but if you're talking about funding to impact ratio, like it's just, you're out there and you're doing it, you're really making a difference to people and their families and in their lives. And if there was that, I just, that would be a really critical first step around standardizing and equal
Yeah.
access. And it doesn't matter because, when people leave the NRH, it's a lottery whether they're going to be able to sustain the gains that have been made in terms of their
Yeah.
rehabilitation because they go off back to it's a very different environment. It's a very, the NRH is fantastic and you get all the, specialist rehab and input, but the rest of your life, So when
Yeah.
you get home, who's going to help you sustain that, maintain that? Who's going to, give you those supports at home? So yeah, I just the continuous journey and across, I think the case management would be one I would talk about and advocate for just around that ability to do more with
Yeah.
less.
Very good. Now, m- the way I work is I read all the information on your website.
Okay.
And one of the things that was very important from my point of view, seeing it from as an outsider, was goals. Goal
Yes.
setting. Tell us a bit
Yes.
about that.
So that's the crux of our model. It's a very goal orientated goal setting. So we would support the person again. Just to go back to what I said earlier around finding what's meaningful for that person.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
what's the big picture? What do you want us to help you to do? People have to want us for in the first
Of
instance.
course.
So if I am looking, I want support with my memory. I want to be able to, get the bus. I want to be able to, do all the different things. So the goal setting is critical for that, because sometimes as well, sometimes after a brain injury, you mightn't realize the full extent of the challenges that you have. Your insight mightn't be. Do you know what I mean? Others
Yeah,
around you might have a better maybe video. So you need to work with the person where they're at now and trying to work towards that. So the goal setting we adopt like a SMART goal setting, so they have to be specific. You have to be able to measure it. You have to be able to achieve it.
yeah,
It needs to be somewhat realistic, and you're putting a time frame on it. So if it's the big goal of, as I said, well, I want to go back to school. Okay, well, we need to learn how or I want to go back to college, and we need to figure out, can you get up
yeah.
every morning at 9 o'clock or whatever? Do you know what I mean? So you're
I
really just
do.
breaking it down to
Yeah,
the first step. Well, what is that? What does that mean? You need to be able to concentrate. So do we build that up a little bit? We read one page today, that's too much. We're going to look at a magazine. Maybe your audio visual memory is better. So we produce the materials that are going to be visual rather than trying to just talk at you and
yeah,
it's just
yeah,
not
yeah,
going in. It's not, sometimes it's not even a memory issue. It can be um that it's a processing thing. So you're just not storing the information in the first place. It's not that you've forgotten it, it's just never gone in. So that's why we have such specialist teams, so we understand those potential effects of the brain injury, and then you can support that person with their goals in an informed way because this part of the brain has been damaged and therefore their strengths are going to be else, something else. So
yeah,
you're
yeah.
trying to play to the person's strengths in order to achieve those goals.
And then
So
goals are different for everyone.
completely different for everyone, completely different for everyone. Because I suppose you start with what is the biggest challenge for you, or what is the biggest, what would have the most benefit for you. And that's where so people gain that confidence when they see they're ticking those off. So this week I will do 3 times this week. I will do it 4 times next week. I will do it 5 times next. And you can build that belief in yourself and the ability, and you are actually building those pathways in the brain, and you're building, the routine, and you're slowly getting your energy back, or whatever it might be, a whole combination of factors. Um, so yeah, so the goals are really important, and then our team would support the person. They're reviewed, they're reviewed at least every kind of 3 months. You set enough time for someone to achieve,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
you also you can adjust them as you go along. They're not set in stone, and that's the other piece that our staff will be trained in terms of how do we support this person to adjust this maybe a little bit, or do we need to amend, are we being too ambitious? Are we not being challenging enough? Do you know what I mean? So you try and
Yeah,
adjust
yeah,
as you go as well. But like that, yes. So you lay the foundations for the skills, and you keep building. And as you said, and the reward, and as people achieve their goals, then we pull back.
yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not going to keep it too much longer.
Okay.
You did mention a step ahead program.
Sure. Yes.
Tell us a bit about that.
Step Ahead program is fantastic. It's acquired brain injury Ireland, but it's a separate referral if you like. You can just
Okay.
refer straight in and not go through. You don't have to be using any of our other services to be
Yeah,
referred
yeah.
to this head program. So it's about supporting people to go back to work or go back to education.
Brilliant.
So again, you'd be prioritizing people around, and you'd be working on all the different functional skills you would have to do that. So what, again, perhaps uh, building people's skills for, concentration, or IT skills, again, being able to, well, do you know what I mean? Do you need adaptive technology to support a little bit, I suppose, of, yeah, so there'd be the assessment bit, and then just delivering them, the skills, so fatigue management, and, all those kind of universal things to really just get people ready to get back into the workplace and get back into education again.
Now, I read all through that and I thought it was a fabulous thing. Have you
Great.
anything else to say before you go? Because I've come to the end of what I want to ask you.
No, I think as I said, I just really very passionate about the work that we do, and I really believe in, in equitable access, and I really, really would love to see us working towards a model that is more um equitable, that people
Yeah,
can get the same. And it's not always this big wraparound. Do you know what I mean? You can prevent that if you get the right service at the right time. It's not always, it doesn't need to turn into a crisis. It doesn't need to
yeah,
turn
yeah.
into, if you're giving the people the right kind of signposts and direction at the right time. So I would, um, yeah, I would just kind of, we'll continue around the advocacy pieces, and we'll be continuing to try and meet that service development and service need, and hope still do the good job that we're doing in the places we are. So yeah, we also really believe in, sorry, I should say this, our
Go on.
rehabilitation of the lifespan. So at the moment, because we're funded through HC Disability, Adult Disability Services, that limits us to 18 to 65, but that's not our stipulation.
Yeah, yeah.
That's nothing to do with your ability to benefit from rehabilitation. That's a funding silo. So
Right.
we're constantly advocating for services for children and young people who've acquired brain injuries, and obviously older adults as well, over 65. They should be able to access the same community neuro rehab that we provide in case management services and so on.
Brilliant.
So that's something we're working towards. So yeah,
Fantastic. Now, last thing. If I'm a
yeah.
person with an acquired brain injury, how do I get in touch with your gang?
Brilliant. Yeah, well, certainly we do have a lot of information on our website, but there's a easy click button say refer. I'd like to be referred. So that's where you go. There's a referral form that does need to be completed by maybe healthcare, somebody in healthcare, your GP or so on,
Yeah,
and they will assist you to fill out a few bits. Then you send that in to us. You'll see, depending on which area you live in the country, there'll be a contact on our website as well, and that comes into us, with your consent. We need your written consent, and then we take it from there, and we'll be in touch.
brilliant. And the website?
www.abiireland.ie.
Brilliant. Catherine, thanks a million for talking to us at
No
Disability
problem.
Matters.
No problem. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, John.